So my name is Sean Scullen, Operations Director at the Victorian Bioenergy Network. Welcome to episode 3, the Biomass to Biomethane webinar series. We're going to showcase success in terms of what good policy looks like to support the development of the biomethane industry. So we've got over 50 organisations here today. We've got about 14 of our members. And so we've got members still joining for this session. So thank you for attending. So VBN is the industry group for bioenergy in Victoria. We are a not-for-profit organisation, and our mission is to support the building of the bioenergy ecosystem so the sector can grow and leverage the many advantages of a strong bioeconomy. We are a member-based organisation, and that advocates for bioenergy policy and industry development. But most importantly, we do create the space for the sector to learn and collaborate. And in the last 2.5 years, we have run 11 face-to-face events, 9 across regional Victoria and 2 in the Melbourne CBD. Today's webinar is the final in our first VBN webinar series, and we're doing this to broaden our engagement to help build the bioenergy ecosystem. I'd like to thank Gemina and LMS Energy for sponsoring this series and bringing this conversation to you all. So what have we got for you today? We have 3 speakers, each bringing a different and important perspective to the biogas and biomethane story, so we understand what it will take to grow this sector here in Victoria and beyond. And so a bit of housekeeping, please use Q&A for Q&A and chat for any other issues that you have joining the webinar. And thanks to the backroom team that are helping with this, Ragini, Rachel and Megan, so they will deal and help support me in delivering a really good webinar. So part 1, we're going to talk about policy perspectives, and the part 2 is a Q&A. So it's quite simple, but there's 3 parts to that part 1. So it is my pleasure to introduce and to bring to the screen Charlotte Morton. And so as Charlotte comes on, hello, Charlotte.
Hi, Sean.
Good
Good
to see you.
afternoon.
I'm adding
You
you to the
too.
spotlight. Good to see you. Sorry, things change from time to time with Zoom, and so I practiced it earlier, and there you go. So, Ron, so welcome, and I'd like to introduce Charlotte Morton, OBE Chief Executive of the World Biogas Association and the UK Anaerobic Digestion and Bioresources Association, called ADBA, roles she's had since founding ADBA's business operations in 2009 and launching the World Biogas Association in 2016. Welcome, Charlotte. Great to have you.
Great to be here.
And also, we, as the VBN, are now a new member of the WBA, so we're happy to join you in the mission. So, and I understand that this year is the World Biogas Association's 10th anniversary, so congratulations on that milestone.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And I know it's a little early there in the UK, but appreciate you joining us. So could you give us the WBA elevator pitch to get our audience up to date with what you guys do? And I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Sean. So thank you so much for the invitation. The World Biogas Association is the global voice of the biogas industry. Our mission is to create the enabling environment for the world's 105 billion tonnes of organic wastes, which today emit vast quantities of harmful methane, to be transformed into valuable products through anaerobic digestion and complementary technologies. These technologies unlock the maximum value from organic waste, producing renewable gas, clean electricity, sustainable fertilizers, and carbon removals, whilst returning nutrients back to our soils. Collectively, these organic wastes contain enough energy to replace around a quarter of today's fossil gas demand. If we fully realise that potential, we could deliver around half the global methane pledge, avoid approximately 0.15 degree of global warming, which, if you've seen the fires raging across Europe at the moment is clearly super important. And it would create an estimated 10 to 15 million jobs jobs worldwide. The WBA works with governments, businesses, and investors to create the policies, regulations, and market frameworks needed to unlock that opportunity, helping countries to build circular economies that improve energy security, strengthen food systems, reduce methane emissions, and accelerate the transition to net zero. In short, our role is to ensure that every country, including Australia, has the policies, standards, and investment environment needed to unlock the enormous value that's currently being wasted.
Mm. No, that's fantastic news. I actually would love to hear about the Making Biogas Happen program that you guys have pioneered over there in Europe. If you'd like to talk about that for a little bit.
Sure. So that program is fundamentally about creating the necessary enabling environment. The biogas industry delivers an extraordinary range of public benefits, but very few of them are properly rewarded financially. A well-run anaerobic digestion plant is going to does much more than produce renewable gas or electricity. It prevents the methane emissions from organic waste, improves waste management, recycles nutrients, produces biofertilizer, supports farmers, etc. But the project developers generally paid for only one of the or two of those outputs, usually the energy and perhaps a gate fee. The value of avoided methane emissions, clean water, healthier soils, nutrient cycling, etc., is often left outside the business case. So that makes getting projects to financial close extremely challenging. At the same time, biogas isn't operating on a level playing field. The fossil gas industry continues to benefit from established infrastructure, mature markets, various forms of public support, and favourable tax treatment. So we're asking renewable gas projects to compete effectively with an incumbent whose full environmental costs are not reflected in its price. So the central policy challenge is therefore to make sure that the value biogas creates is recognised, rewarded, supported through a coherent long-term framework. And from our global experience, I would highlight 5 areas that could be particularly relevant to Australia. And all of these come from the model global biogas regulatory framework, which is effectively taking all of the best practices from other countries and putting them into one place to facilitate an enabling environment for the biogas industry, given that it's a circular economy process, so crossing sectors. So if I just quickly run through sort of the 5 key areas that would be particularly relevant to Australia, the first would be to establish a clear national strategy and measurable targets. Investors need confidence that government policy will survive beyond a single funding round or political cycle. Governments should assess the sustainable feedstock potential and set clear targets for biogas and biomethane production. And then these national targets should be translated into sector-specific pathways for, say, agriculture, food processing, wastewater, municipal organic waste, transport, industry, and gas grid decarbonisation. Targets aren't sufficient on their own, but they certainly create direction and accountability. The World Biogas Association's Global Biogas Regulatory Framework, which is the first element developed as part of the Making Biogas Happen programme, brings together international best practice across those 9 policy pillars, covering national policy, feedstocks, the use of biogas, digestate, gas quality, technical standards, environmental permitting, planning and health and safety. And the objective is to give governments a practical starting point, rather than requiring every country to reinvent the wheel, spending years designing a regulatory framework from scratch. For Australia, the important point, though, isn't simply to copy another country's system. Australia's got its own geography, agriculture, economy, gas infrastructure, and federal structure, but it can learn from what has worked elsewhere and adapt it to local conditions. Harmonisation, though, is also important from a developer's perspective. because the more standards and regulations are harmonized globally, the easier it is to operate. Slightly conscious of time. The second point to make would be that it's really important to reward all of the outcomes, not just the energy. So, of course, that could include recognizing avoided methane emissions through credible carbon incentives, rewarding renewable gas through certificates, contracts, or blending obligations, providing concessional finance or loan guarantees for early projects, valuing nutrient recovery and biofertilizer production, and of course, recognizing the avoided costs of landfill, water pollution, and unmanaged organic waste. Methane is especially important. Obviously, it's a powerful, short-lived climate pollutant, so reducing it can have a rapid impact on warming. Yet the climate value of capturing methane from manure, food waste, or wastewater is not always fully reflected in project revenues. Our regulatory framework therefore recommends bringing methane properly into emissions reduction policy and ensuring that financing is aligned with climate goals. It identifies instruments including carbon incentives, feed-in tariffs, blending mandates, tradable certificates, emissions trading, and low-interest lending. The objective, however, shouldn't be permanent subsidy. It should be to provide sufficient certainty and support to build the early market, reduce costs, develop supply chains, and make projects investable. But I think crucially, policy needs to be stable. A generous incentive that changes abruptly can be less useful than a modest mechanism that investors can rely on for 10 to 15 years. I think I'm slightly going over the time, but if I just highlight the other element is around building social license through demonstrably high standards. Social license, I think, is really important for project developers. And it can't really be achieved just through public relations alone. It has to be earned through responsible development, excellent operation, transparency, and genuine engagement with local communities. Most opposition to biogas isn't opposition to renewable energy in principle. It's concern about very practical issues such as odour, traffic, noise, visual impact, etc. And I think those concerns have to be taken seriously from the beginning, not after a planning application has already been submitted. So I think it's really important for developers to clearly explain what the plant will be processing, where the material will be coming from, how traffic and odour will be controlled. And that's why the second major element of our Making Biogas Happen programme is the Anaerobic Digestion Certification Scheme International, which sets minimum health and safety standards for the design, build and operation of biogas plants, and provides an independently audited framework covering the operational performance, health and safety, environmental protection, regulatory compliance, etc. And this really matters for social license because one badly managed plant can damage confidence in the entire industry. So certification should sit alongside good community engagement, not replace it.
No, totally. And look, you've actually covered all the material that I was hoping you would cover. So thank you for that. And we're actually on time because I took a little bit less time than I thought I would take earlier, but that's good. So from a social license perspective, though, there's popular support and then there's community support for a particular project. Do you draw a distinction between those two things, and how do you do that? So more, by popular support, I mean I'm talking to my local MP and I think this is a good idea versus they're going to build one near me and I might not think it's a good idea, but I could be engaged to come around to it. So there's two, I see there's two different levels of support. Is that what you see?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I suppose you're talking about NIMBYism, not in my backyard.
Hmm.
And yeah, it is. People might generally want renewable energy, but do they want it next door, or being produced next door? So yeah, it's it's super important for people to have confidence that the plants that are being built next door won't have an impact on them personally, and will protect all relevant stakeholders.
No, totally. Thank you. Now, anyway, we'll wrap it there because there'll be some more questions later. But thank you for that, and I'll bring Todd onto the call. But and we should talk to you later, Charlotte. Thank you.
Thanks.
And hello, Todd. Todd Settle is joining us from New South Wales, and I'd just like to do a short introduction so we can get onto the meat of the issue this afternoon. So Todd is Principal Policy Officer for Renewable Fuels at the New South Wales Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, DQ, as it's affectionately known as well. He led the development of the New South Wales Renewable Fuel Strategy, including expansion of the New South Wales Renewable Fuel Scheme. Todd also leads on policy matters relating to driving future fuels, including bioenergy and hydrogen, as they support industrial decarbonisation, regional economic growth and fuel security. It's great to have you here, Todd. Welcome.
Thanks, Sean.
So without further ado, because we like to keep things rolling, could you give the audience a brief outline of the New South Wales Renewable Fuel Scheme, RFS, as it's also known, in the broader context of New South Wales policy settings and the current status of for the RFS? I might leave myself on screen so that we don't have to muck about with that later if we need to talk further.
Yeah, no problem. I think I'll probably reiterate the point there that Charlotte made about that social license piece and the need to get all these enablers right, because I think that does really flow into where we're up to in New South Wales and the approach that we've taken and how we've adapted that approach over the recent years. So for everyone's context, the Renewable Fuel Scheme is a market-based production incentive whereby we set a legislated certificate price, and then we set liable parties who have to purchase and retire certificates against that target based on their share of total New South Wales fossil gas use. We subsequently set eligible production, so producers can then create and sell certificates for every eligible gigajoule of fuel that they produce. This creates an additional market-based revenue stream for renewable gas producers and is largely focused on seeding that market and establishing the initial scale of production within the sector. If we go back quite a few years, because the scheme has been around in its iterations since the New South Wales Hydrogen Strategy was released in the early part of this decade. And we went out and consulted in early 2024 on if the scheme should be expanded to additional fuels and liable parties. And I think one of the key things that came out of that was the feedback was pretty broadly and generally a strong support for expanding the scheme to additional fuels, but a strong acknowledgement that the scheme alone, a market-based production mechanism, was not going to be enough in its own right to address the breadth of barriers that we're facing the sector, and that goes to some of the points that Charlotte raised earlier. So we went through an iterative process after that in consulting across government, ensuring that we were pulling the right people into the room, developing that suite of options, and then we went out and undertook that kind of broader consultation through the release of a discussion paper, which then helped us add that further fidelity and inform the development of the Renewable Fuel Strategy, which was released by Minister Sharp late last year. The strategy aims, I think, to seed the market and set that enabling ecosystem through a comprehensive suite of about 20 actions that across multiple different focus areas and barriers that we were looking to address. While the scheme expansion is one of those key and one of the bigger actions within the strategy, noting it's the opportunity there to support biomethane and how it can support New South Wales legislated emission reduction targets, our forecast East Coast gas shortages and some of the waste management challenges we're facing. There were several other kind of key actions that needed to be progressed in tandem, and we're a significant way through implementing them, including up to $130 million being available to support scaled renewable fuel production and supply chain assets delivered through the Net Zero Manufacturing Initiative. And we've actually already had 2 successful biomethane projects announced, of which you'll likely hear a bit from Joe after me. And round 2 of that Net Zero Manufacturing Initiative is currently open for submissions as well. We've had an excellent response to the $40 million in targeted biomethane funding that was released recently, and we're going through the process of assessing those submissions at the moment. I think we've got some members of the Green Power scheme. So the Green Power is a national certification scheme that is run by New South Wales, and one of the key things that we put forward in the strategy was to expand out that certification suite to support additional fuels. I think if we look at where we're up to in the scheme part of it, it is one of the things that it is a complex piece. Market mechanisms are never easy to develop. There's a lot of thinking and work that needs to be going into getting those settings right in the first instance, and we've been working through that meticulously and trying to conscious of the fact that we need to get some of these signals and some of this certainty out to the market. But we're fortunate enough that we got a bill into a parliament a few months ago, and that's progressing through parliamentary processes at the moment. We're on track with the flip side of that, which is the follow-up of the regulatory amendments and the rule development, which will outline that eligible production, and we're tracking well to be able to follow through with those shortly after the scheme bill reaches.
That's great. No, good to hear. And do you have a delivery date for the legislation? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but sorry.
No problem at all. I wish I had total control over delivery deadlines for Parliament, but no, unfortunately it is over the parliamentary process, and they will go through their iterations of looking at the bill and ensuring that it's in the best interest of everyone. I think our next sitting period in New South Wales is in that September period, so I do have my fingers crossed that we'll come up for debate and be considered again in September.
Does it have partisan support?
Yeah, I would say my reading of the tea leaves here is there is quite broad support for renewable fuels. I think there is a lot of boxes that renewable fuels tick as far as the barriers and where the focus is of different parties at the moment. And I think if there's the decarbonisation benefits it can provide, I think front and centre at the moment is really consideration of these of the fuel security challenges we face. In Australia, we're heavily dependent on imported fuels, particularly in the liquid side, but we also face challenges of East Coast gas shortfalls on the horizon as well. So I think there is broad support for it, and the economic benefits it can also deliver to some of our rural and industrial heartlands is significant as well. So I think there is genuine broad support for it, but obviously it is a complex mechanism to make sure that everyone's comfortable where it lands.
And I think it's fair to say that you've considered a broader suite of policy interactions across the whole policy gamut in New South Wales to make sure that you're hitting things like regional development and innovation and other the portfolios. I think that's the message I've been getting from you. Is that a fair summary of it?
Yeah, definitely. I think I guess the capex challenges, these facilities typically have large capex challenges. I don't think we need to shy away from that. They can be costly to run and to get up to the scale that we need to bring down those cost curves. But that's not the only barriers we're facing. We touched a little bit on the need for social license. This goes nowhere if we're not educating people and allowing them to understand how these fuels can benefit them. We're not going to get anywhere if we're not clear and conscious of delivering the value of these projects and these commodities back to the communities that are at the kind of core of producing them. We've got a complex regulatory environment. We've got lots of risks and opportunities we need to be balancing as these projects develop in the state. So there's a lot of work we need to do to make sure we're getting that full spectrum of settings right, and they're all going to work in interaction with each other. both at a New South Wales level, but that also includes how we interact with other jurisdictions, how we interact with the states on either side of us, and how we work with the Commonwealth and at that level to ensure that the levers that we have available to us at New South Wales, we are pulling the right levers for that, and the levers that are best pulled and delivered at the national level, we're also taking an eye to that and making sure we've got that alignment.
No, good stuff. It sounds like a monumental cat herding job. So I wish you well with that. And we're right on time, so thank you for that. We'll see you a bit later in Q&A, and I'll bring Joe onto the conversation now, and we can have a look at the project development perspective. So I will bid you adieu for the moment. And oops, no, wrong one. And of course, just as I clicked it, it reorganized itself. One.
There we go.
You are here by the magic of technology, and welcome, Joe. I'll do a quick intro. Thanks for joining. Joe Oliver is Managing Director and Co-founder of ASX-listed Delorean Corporation. It is a leading bioenergy infrastructure developer, constructor, and owner-operator, and we'll hear some more about that soon. Welcome, Joe. Thanks for taking the time out of your very busy project development schedule. And if you could give us an update of where Delorean is up to project-wise to start us off, that'd be good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And look, it's great to be here supporting the VBN. I think you're doing a great job. I think just having the host of speakers from Charlotte and Todd, obviously supporting the VBN in the work that you're doing is great. So look, from Delorean's perspective, we've evolved significantly over the last few years. We from listing 5 years ago, I think we've built our reputation on EPC. Contracted delivery. We've built most of the facilities that are here in Australia from a commercial industrial organic waste stream perspective. So in terms of whilst we've built that sort of reputation on EPC, our focus is in that build, own, operate path and pipeline, and we've developed nationally that integrated developer, constructor, long-term asset owner is where our focus is, with a sort of a national rollout across Australia to effectively divert organic waste from landfill, which whilst is fairly new to Australia, is very mature around the rest of the world. Our focus is diverting thousands of tons of organic waste from landfill, producing effectively renewable gas is where our focus is. So recently, we hit a major milestone with a state significant development approval for the New South Wales project that has been supported both by state and ARENA. So New South Wales government and federal government of ARENA have supported this project. So a big thank you to them for entrusting our capability and track record into supporting that pathway there. In addition, we have moved a project in South Australia from development, site ownership, through to just over 80% complete, ready to start accepting waste shortly, packaged waste in the coming months, then into liquid and then solid, and then producing gas before the end of this calendar year. So in that sort of back end of November, December timeframe. So that transition for us is key. The track record of understanding how to deliver projects in Australia under the commercial or the construction landscape that we've got here, but also putting all of those learnings into the commercial reality of Australia and working through with South Australia SA1 project coming on stream shortly. That will be the first project processing commercial industrial organic waste streams for renewable natural gas. So it's great to see the work that Gemina and Sydney Water have done with Malabar, creating that path forward. The standards changing to support renewable gas, and policy and regulatory changes. So we've seen it's never been stronger that governments are focusing on that decarbonisation industry pathway and looking for reliable commercial energy solutions that align to what Australia needs, basically. So we've got a huge amount of waste. We've got an energy requirement. Let's see how the two of those sectors work together to support that decarbonisation pathway. So it's a quick.
Totally. You've got a fair pipeline of projects, and it's really exciting to see. And the hard yards that you see are not just the policy; it's the regulatory bit that people often leave off that conversation. Is the getting it to a conclusion and operational. The licensing to operate at the end of the day is one of the final hurdles, and then ongoing monitoring, obviously. So, can you speak to that whole chain from policy through to actually getting the plant up and running, so that just illustrate where the challenges are and where the opportunities are? I think is
definitely
the question.
Yeah, look, I think it's a really interesting industry that is really driving forward at this current moment. I think policy is really leading the way, and it's good to hear from Todd earlier, just with some of the changes that they're implementing, as well as the policy settings. I think what we'd like to see is more alignment around regulatory as well, so to support that fast-tracked approach and that rollout. So it's not just about obtaining approvals, but it's about just going through the process. Each state is different. Obviously, if we focus on New South Wales, with the recent sort of approval that we've gone through, multiple key stakeholders that need to be involved through that. I think some of the challenges are, the timeline of investing $1 to getting a return on $1 is significant, and that's mainly because what we've got is, whilst policy is supporting that path, the support around grants is in infrastructure. So getting it to that point requires an approval, and a project isn't just about having a feedstock or a site. It's about having multiple key stakeholders from EPA licensing, utility approvals, network connections, environmental permits, multiple agency consultations. So they're all very important. Not taking anything away from that. It's just, how do we run these in parallel under the Australian context to fast track that delivery from development or concept into development, and then into implementation, construction, and operation, and understanding that isn't something that can be done overnight. If I invest $2 million into a development approval, it's going to take me, in some cases, anything from 9 months to 18 months before I've got that approval. And then I'm still not making $1 until I've built the facility. So they are the Australian sort of context challenges that we are faced with, and that's what we're heavily focused on as well.
Yeah, look, and what, maybe we could put this in context, from start to finish to actually having income. What's the typical period of time, and then what would great look like compared to that, as we build our or remove the barriers that some of the regulatory burden that we have currently, because it's not set up for this. What would that look like, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, we can't turn these sites on overnight. We know that there's a construction time period that can typically range from about 12 months to 18 months. So before we get it into construction, we've got to get that approval process streamlined. Moving through that, we know that bioenergy is mature. It's not new. This is we don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's just what process do we need to go down. There is quite an extensive cost, especially sort of New South Wales, around getting that development approval. So how do we look at running these elements in parallel? We need a design. We need to understand the environmental impact. We're not looking to short circuit that, but more how do we these through in parallel. We see the pathway just around recognizing anaerobic digestion not as an emerging technology, it's mature. So what can we learn from overseas? What can we learn from even the past projects that we've built? How can we speed up that process to ensure that where we're developing and deploying facilities is a very clear path effectively. So yeah, I think how do we speed that process up? I think we've got to learn from overseas. I think Charlotte's touched on that. We've got to show great examples of facilities that sort of the net zero challenge has changed. This is more about circular economy. This is more about how we utilize a waste product and generate energy from it, and how do we ensure that we don't have problems in the deployment to align to the policy requirements with a regulatory process. So that probably helps to shed a bit of light on some of the learnings that we've had. Each state is different. I would highlight that as well. So bringing alignment across, as a Commonwealth, across federally, I think would also help. We've got different regulations around digestate in one state compared to others. We've got different views on different elements, from landfill levies for landfills and everything in between. So alignment, I think, is key to support a fast-tracked or an improved time frame that would really help.
Great. No, thank you. Now we're into Q&A time, so what I'm going to do is bring Charlotte and Todd onto the screen, and we should be all together, hopefully. Yes, it's magic. And I've got some questions already, and so what I might do is I might throw the first question I have is to Charlotte, if I may. And we might come back to the digestate thing a little later, but for the moment, Charlotte, from your global perspective, what are the countries getting it right that are successfully scaling biogas and biomethane that we could take example from?
Well, it's a great question. I'd probably say that no country's got everything right. So rather than copying one model, Australia's got the opportunity to take the best ideas from around the world and create a system that suits its own circumstances. But if we take a few examples, Germany has showed that the importance of long-term investment certainty, building the world's largest biogas industry through stable policy. Denmark demonstrated how biomethane can become a major part of a country's gas supply by aligning agricultural, energy, and climate policy. Italy successfully integrated anaerobic digestion into farming, recognizing the value of both renewable gas and biofertilizers. And perhaps most recently, we've seen stellar growth in France, which created a strong market for biomethane through predictable regulation and in particular support for grid injection. So I suppose it's not just one subsidy or incentive, it's treating biogas as strategic infrastructure rather than just another renewable energy technology covering all aspects.
Yeah, because it fits into a system, if you like, and different locations and different geographies and different feedstocks will imply different supports are required, I imagine. So that's good. Now, so I'm going to jump to Todd now with a question. What are New South Wales government doing to encourage retailers to engage with RNG developers, renewable natural gas RNG developers, to ensure that there will be sufficient RNG available on the market to meet their liability?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there is a challenge with novel market-based schemes like this, and it's building liquidity in from as early as possible. It doesn't just start. You don't just have a liquid market from day one, unfortunately. So this is going to be quite iterative, and we're going to need to do a large amount of engagement and confidence building that this is coming, and we are doing as much of that as we can. So I'll probably say we're doing two elements to that. I mentioned earlier that we were really focused on getting that regulatory package or the bill into Parliament. For me, it's about this iterative confidence that I'm able to provide producers and liable parties that what the scheme's going to look like, how it's going to operate, and getting that bill into Parliament is one big piece of that. Everyone can Google it, look it up. You can read the bill, what it looks like in its current form, so you can see it, and it's a tangible piece there that they can start to see the writing on the wall, and the scheme is coming into effect, and it is commencing from next year. That confidence will continue. The regulatory package and the regulations, when we put them through, that will cover a lot of the administrative pieces of the scheme, and the rule that will outline predominantly that eligible production. Each one of those is going to add further confidence to that the market is going to kind of continue and what the market is going to look like. The flip side of that is the significant amount of engagement that we've been doing with liable parties. So this is not news to me. I know that there is challenges when you go into the commercial negotiating rooms and those discussions going on between the liable party and those eligible producers. And I guess for my part, it's about educating the liable parties about how the scheme operates, what it might mean in their individual context, without doing their job for them ultimately. But and they need to understand it themselves.
No, it's certainly. It's a lot of moving pieces, but my question is, at what point do we need to do the engagement of the polity, as it were, of the general community on that? Because we've been talking about getting investor confidence so people will build stuff, and then we do need some political capital in the form of community support, either generally and also specifically for projects. When does that happen, do you think, in the lifetime of the legislation, and when we put that out?
Sorry, establishing the kind of community support and the social license, is that
yes.
I don't think there is a point in time that happens. That is ongoing, constant, and iterative. It is throughout the life and going forward. If you look at how potential other renewable fuels and the social license challenges they're faced, and some of the challenges in uptake and usage they've faced as a result of it, we cannot take our eye off that, and we need to be very clear and consistent in that messaging and education campaign to show that we are putting in place best practice regulation, best practice emissions accounting, reporting frameworks, and that sort of piece, to ensure that we maintain everyone's confidence that these projects are in everyone's best interest, and the opportunities that they're delivering are delivering back to those communities as well.
Yeah, and look, I'll just slip another little question in that just popped up, is the alignment with National Cabinet to get alignment across these areas to generate a consistent, if you like, even support across the country politically, and then obviously socially. Can you make any comments around that, about what's going on there, just generally?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So I think I engaged bilaterally with a lot of the other jurisdictions. I think New South Wales is somewhat ahead of the game in some of this policy thinking, and we've got some work to do to ensure that our regulatory environment is best practice and aligned. But as far as the national piece of this, I sit on one of the working groups under the Energy Climate Change Ministerial Council, and there is a commitment to put forward and develop options around a national approach to renewable gases. Unfortunately, I can't give you too much on what's in that and where that's up to, but hopefully I can give the confidence that we are having those regular engagements, and we do have the ear of National Cabinet around looking at how renewable gases can deliver so much opportunity for us collectively, and that a national approach to overcoming some of the barriers is likely the best.
And the lever that we now have of energy security, how has that advanced the for your
Yeah,
journey?
I'd say anyone who's read the New South Wales Renewable Fuel Strategy and has it on their bedside table, we talk about the objectives that it can deliver. It is decarbonisation, it's regional economic benefit, and it's fuel security. I would say some of the recent events overseas and the impacts on our broader energy markets have really shifted fuel security up to their first amongst equal in the current debate and focus across governments. The recent events have really exposed how import dependent Australia is, and that's really driving a lot of thinking and discussion at the moment.
Yep. No, thank you. And shifting gears, and Joe, you haven't had a question yet, but there's one here for you. How do the different operating landscapes in different states affect your business priorities? Or how are they affecting your business priorities now?
It's a great question. So look, we've got to be commercially led here. So whatever we can do to underpin returns on investment is where our focus is. Now, the policy alignment in terms of, for example, how much waste, is related to population, also manufacturing, where that sort of policy support in terms of grants, regulatory approvals, pathway to market is what we see as key points. Effectively, everything plugs into a financial model, and that financial model needs to give a commercial return to enable investment into this sector. Then it's a timing element, and from a selection of site through the regulatory framework to get an approved development approval to enable to move into construction is our focus, noting that we're not a manufacturer with a plant that is located in South Australia or our sort of scope is a blank piece of paper that looks at nationally where's the best place to put facilities that support a return on investment. So we're very commercially led. We're then focused around implementation through policy and regulatory, how that can be supported. So it's great to see the work that New South Wales have done. We are seeing, the New South Wales have got the largest waste problem, the highest landfill levies. It's got the biggest opportunity, but balance that out with the cost of land, location. Where does the energy price come into it? How does everything sort of fold in? Is probably the focus, which I think a lot of people have got now as well. So I think it's not just do I have a feedstock or do I have a site location? It's everything that rolls the big picture here around deploying facilities, digestate policy, all the way through each point. We know that CO2 is more localized. So whilst you might have a project and you try and factor CO2 into the commercial base case, there might not be CO2 consumption within that sort of area. So it's about sort of aligning to location, commercial returns, how we can sort of pull the projects together, and then how we get support through that process at the same time, both policy and regulatory.
Yes, yeah, and of course I'm going to ask you what the best state to invest in is, but I'm not going to get you to answer that question, so
No.
I'll let you off that one.
I don't think I can actually. So, so yeah.
So Charlotte, and I'll also get you to chime in here too, Joe, is that we've had a question from Steve Button on if you ignore the state-to-state variations in regulations for digestate, are you seeing people recognise the value of digestate that you will be producing? But before I go there, can I ask Charlotte, digestate in the European or the global context, are people seeing the value like strongly or not strongly, or where is it at the moment?
Yeah, no, yeah, I think digestate has been one of the most challenging areas for some time, well, forever. I think it's primarily the form that it comes in. we know that if you just take out the value of the nutrients and value those alone, it's hugely valuable. But it farmers are used to sort of chemical fertilizers in the form that they're in, and so they really need to. They would much prefer to have products that they're used to using. So it takes quite a long time to demonstrate to farmers that digestate in the form it currently is as valuable to them. And of course, it's still certainly where I am, it's still generally speaking a cost rather than a revenue generator. I think one of the policy mechanisms I think would be incredibly valuable would be to have a renewable fertilizer obligation, putting an obligation on fertilizer manufacturers to source a percentage of their supply from renewable sources, so digestate. Fertilizer manufacturers are best placed to turn, or one of the best stakeholders to turn digestate into product forms that farmers can find easy to use.
And that actually makes perfect sense. It's like getting your green electricity, isn't it? It's the same thing. So that's a good point. Now, Joe, what are we seeing in Australia in terms of where we are in terms of, are people really seeing the value of digestate yet, and what do we have to do to climb that value ladder, if you like?
Yeah, so there's probably a couple of answers to this, and I might actually just touch on Charlotte's points as well. So look, from an Australian perspective, can you get a bankable offtake for digestate? No, that's not something that is currently in the current market, and that's all for the reasons that Charlotte's highlighted. Is digestate a cost? Well, it depends on what form the digestate's in. So if it is in a liquid form, i.e., straight out the process, low nutrient level, mainly water, the cost of logistics is a cost. So when you're moving water around with a low nutrient base, farmers aren't willing to pay for that or as much for that because there is a cost of transport. And again, depends on where the site is located, where the digestate is going to be applied, and how it's going to be applied. We see the value in concentrating that digestate to capture the raw nutrient value. So this isn't about outputting a liquid fertilizer. This is more about trying to concentrate into whilst it still might be a liquid fertilizer, it's capturing the NPK in its raw form as value to be able to remove that water content and be giving the farmers an organic fertilizer that is able to be spread to land, that isn't about carting huge volumes of liquid around. So, and I think that's where the current focus of the Australian market is. So it's about sort of bringing that alignment. So digestate as a offtake, difficult to get a 5-10 year offtake. We have heard of people talking about multiple dollars for that value. I think it's we see it as a zero cost, but also an opportunity. And capturing that opportunity is about putting the process in to concentrate that material and take the value in the nutrients in the raw form, which Charlotte touched on as well. So hopefully that sort of clarifies it a bit more. But I don't think it's just about saying digestate is one form. Digestate is probably 3 different forms. You've got it in a liquid phase, you've got it in a concentrated liquid phase, and you've also got a solid component. And that solid material and concentrated liquid material has value greater than what typically the logistics cost would be. But proving that market, getting the farming community on board, highlighting that it doesn't turn plants a different color or they grow different material, and that it's being properly pasteurized, so following like a PAS 110 standard, or ensuring that there isn't any applying that isn't going to wipe the crop out, I think is where the education piece comes in.
Well,
I think any support around that, I think is always welcomed. Just one other final point is we have seen it work well in land rehabilitation. So, we've been looking at models of even acquiring land to rehabilitate, put the nutrients back in where the nutrients have been stripped, and utilize digestate as a land rehabilitation to build up that base, build up the soil ecology, and improve that land so it can be used back into the food cycle. But that's probably something that is a later piece for Delorean. We do have the beauty of producing digestate on most of the sites that we've built, so we do fully understand what digestate is and where it can be applied as well.
So currently, though, digestate is generally valued at nothing on the business case for an AD plan. Is that fair at the moment? Like, is that what happens at the moment?
Is it fair or is it real? I think is probably
The
two
two
two elements.
questions.
I mean, yeah, I mean we it's hard to build a business case upon something that could happen. Unless somebody's willing to, which we haven't seen, write a check, lock in, a take or pay contract for a certain volume with a certain characteristic. I think that's the education piece that's needed to get there. And I think digestate, we need the facilities to create the product to enable the market. It's the same as renewable natural gas. We're trying to sell a product that you can't get in the market. And until you create that supply, you won't have the demand. So it's about making sure that there's pathways, education to enable the demand that is supported by supply that equally is followed by policy and regulatory. So that's the
So just to finalise that, if we had harmonised digestate legislation around the country, that would be one thing. But until we've established a market, that's not it. The offtake isn't going to happen. It's not going to be bankable until the product is developed sufficiently so that it's accepted in the marketplace. So there's two elements to it, isn't there? Two key elements.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a pathway for digestate in the sense of it's just whether it's a cost neutral, or a value, and it's about moving through that. That might be that the first year it's not a cost neutral, it's a cost, and then it moves into a cost neutral, and then it moves into a market that can be supplied. So we're not going to do this overnight. I think we've got to acknowledge that. We've got to highlight, I think a common regulatory alignment. Digestate is, biofertilizer. I think in a lot of cases we reference things wrong. We've taken a waste product, put it through a process, cleaning the product, moving the inert material. This isn't a dehydration technology where as soon as you hit it with water, it then starts the breakdown. This is already broken down through a process, release the energy from the volatile matter to produce methane that has been used to displace fossil fuel. That what we're left with is nutrients, concentrating that and displacing urea and other nutrients or fossil-based nutrients has a great impact in that circular economy. So that's sort of been our focus, but it's not going to be done overnight. I think is the main element.
No, totally not. Now we are getting close to time. I'm conscious of that. Is there anything else, Charlotte or Todd, you'd like to chime in on in finishing? Charlotte, on the digestate thing, any final observations there?
Oh, on the digestate piece specifically.
Yes.
It is a valuable product in essence. So really thinking about getting that value reflected commercially for developers. If you could make that one change, you'd change the whole economics
So
of
yeah,
a plant because there's
And,
huge volumes there.
and there is, because it always generates digestate, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
Todd, in terms of the regulatory milieu that you have to navigate through, including EPAs and so on, how do you see that being guided? Don't we have to go to a national level for that sort of digestate regulations piece?
I think that's probably a tough shift in its entirety from how we currently operate in a federal model, but I think cohesion between the states should be that immediate kind of horizon, and that's what we should be looking to achieve. And I think we've touched on some of it. We have these engagement forums in place, and this is on the minds of national cabinet ministers and a lot of my colleagues across the different jurisdictions. So we are aware that there is the opportunity here, and we are engaging on these. When it comes to regulations, particularly regulations between states, it's not going to be resolved overnight, but there is a momentum and a focus on working towards modernising some of our regulatory frameworks to ensure that they are balancing modern risk and modern opportunities.
Totally. Thank you. And thank you to all our speakers tonight, Charlotte, Todd and Joe, for that. That was really worthwhile. I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap now, which will be very short because we are at 5 o'clock. And, the messages I've taken from today are that biomethane works today. It's a key tool for decarbonisation, for hard-to-abate industries in particular. And biomass is abundant. Policy will enable industry growth, and the regulatory bit has to be there too. And we do have to provide certainty for investors. So that's some of the things we've got there. And it sounds like to me the renewable fertiliser obligation is a thing that might unlock some value in the whole equation. But once again, thank you for your time, and for us at VBN. Our call to actions for you, our audience, is that join the conversation with us as you have. So thank you for joining this. Come to our VBN events. You can join VBN, help us spread the word. And just a few last sentences. We have an end of year soiree coming up, and there will be music involved just before Christmas. There's a site visit to a Melbourne Metro site, bioenergy site. And we're going to have a renewable gas panel event coming up shortly in August. And there's a bioenergy forum next year in Shepparton in February. But stay tuned for announcements in the coming weeks. And once again, thank you to our panelists and the support team, but most of all to you, our audience, and have a great evening and enjoy the Commonwealth Games. So good night.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Bye.